rain-slicked cobblestone streets. Whispers spread among the common folk of a serial killer lurking in the narrow alleyways. He was known as the Soul Reaper, leaving behind only the mutilated bodies of small children, grotesquely disfigured, without a single clue pointing to his identity. Chapter 1. A new murder on the grim nights of London in 1859, as gas lamps cast flickering shadows on damp walls. Horror struck once again. In a filthy alleyway, the police huddled around the body of a young boy, no older than 9, lying motionless on the cold ground, with unseeing eyes staring into the void. His body was stiff, his mouth slightly open, as if frozen in a final silent scream. His pale skin bore the marks of dried blood on his cheeks, and his small fingers were dug into his palms, as though he had clung to life until the bitter end. Detective Reginald Thorne sighed heavily. He was a tall, gaunt man with a haggard complexion, as if sleep had abandoned him long ago. Dark rings circled his deep-set eyes, which scanned the scene with an intensity that spoke of relentless obsession. His coat was old and tattered, his hat barely concealing the weary creases on his grim face. He was not well liked among his peers. His unconventional methods and disregard for strict protocol made him an outcast even within his own department. Thorne was a man haunted by memories that clawed at the edges of his sanity. His nightmares never ceased, and with each new crime, the weight on his soul grew heavier. Beside him knelt Officer Carter, a younger man with a sturdy build and disheveled brown hair. His face was perpetually tense, as though anxiety had become his natural state. He struggled to look at the corpse, the stench of death clawing at his throat.
Thorne, this is the 5th victim with the same pattern. I don't understand how this monster keeps slipping away.
Thorne ran a cold hand along his neck, studying the body before muttering.
This killer isn't just taking lives, he's creating art. Look at the precise cuts. No mess, no haste. This isn't murder. This is craftsmanship, twisted as it may be.
The next morning, a peculiar letter arrived at Scotland Yard, written in red ink. Mr. Thorne, you are getting closer, yet you will never catch me. I pity you. You are smarter than the imbeciles you work with, yet too slow. Let us play a game, you and I. The winner shall claim something truly precious. Do you have the nerve to continue? Attached to the letter was something more horrifying. A lock of hair, still damp with blood. Carter hesitated to touch it, but Thorne held it between his fingers, inhaling the scent of death embedded within. The killer was not merely a murderer. He was a beast that relished suffering. His real name was Elias Crawley, a man with a tragic past, but he was no victim of fate. He was its architect. Raised in a cruel orphanage where he had endured unspeakable torments, he had not broken under the weight of his suffering. Instead, he had learned to feed off the agony of others. Crawley was an unnervingly tall and skeletal man, with deep-set, hollow black eyes and dark rings that made his appearance even more terrifying. He always wore a long black coat and leather gloves, hiding old scars on his hands. His expression was eerily calm, as if emotions had withered within him long ago. Yet he found pleasure in witnessing the pain of others. He didn't simply kill. He indulged in his work. His methods were intricate. He used surgical instruments, with the precision of a deranged artist, severing his victims' limbs slowly, reveling in their final moments of terror. During his investigation in a poverty-stricken district of London, Thorne encountered a little girl named Elizabeth, no older than 10. She had golden hair and wide blue eyes, eyes that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of Thorn's deceased daughter. She clutched a tattered doll in her hands, gazing up at him with innocent curiosity.
Sir, will you catch the bad man?
Thorn felt an unbearable weight in his chest. The child's face dragged forth the ghosts of his past, the memory of his own daughter, lost to illness years ago. The resemblance was agonizing.
I promise, little one.
But days later, Elizabeth was found dead. Beside her body lay a chilling note. She was delightful to play with, but she cried too much. I do not like tears, so I silenced them. Will you cry now, Thorn? Her tiny body was wrapped in her once white dress, now stained with crimson. Her glassy blue eyes were frozen open, as if pleading for life in her final moments. As Thorn delved deeper, he uncovered a disturbing pattern. All the victims had one thing in common. They had all frequented a small toy shop on the city's outskirts. As Thorn delved deeper, he uncovered a disturbing pattern. All the victims had one thing in common. They had all frequented a small toy shop on the city's outskirts. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Barkley, seemed anxious when questioned, though he refused to say much. Thorn suspected the man knew more than he let on. After days of surveillance, Thorn noticed a suspicious figure lurking near the shop at night. A man in a long black coat moved cautiously, almost deliberately. Thorn decided to set a trap, publishing a cryptic message in the local papers, hinting that he knew the secret of the toy shop. That night, the killer returned, but the police were waiting, yet somehow he escaped once more, leaving behind only another note. You have come too close, yet you are still far away. The killer's taunts grew more sinister. He no longer merely killed. He sent pieces of his victims to Thorn. This little hand was painting yesterday. Today it is a beautiful memory. Thorn's hands trembled with fury. This was no longer just a case. It was a war. Thorn's hands trembled with fury. This was no longer just a case. It was a war. In their final confrontation, deep inside an abandoned factory, Thorn leveled his gun at Crawley, who stood unfazed, smiling faintly.
You have won, Thorn, but are you sure you have not become just like me?
He slowly raised his hand, revealing a blood-stained scalpel.
I took another one before you arrived. Isn't that beautiful?
He chuckled darkly. Thorn could no longer hold back. His finger tightened on the trigger, and then the shot rang out